Hi, it's Paul Guppy with the Washington Policy Center with our regular update of issues that are going on in Washington State. As always, please like, share, and subscribe our channel. We love our growing audience and our comments. Today, I'll be talking about 5 different issues. First is a new report out about our state's tax burden. Also, recent action regarding at the national level regarding sanctuary states and sanctuary cities that affects us here in Washington. Also, a case of trying to suppress free speech at the Puyallup Fair. Maybe some people deny that that was the case. We'll look into that. And then also, there's a national debate about redistricting. Does Washington State have a redistricting problem? We'll talk about that. A ruling about in-state tuition for illegal aliens that was happened in one of the states, and see how it affects us here. And then lastly, well, that's it. Lastly, I'll give an update about events that are coming up for us. So let's jump right into it. Not surprisingly, well, maybe it is. I should give the background. A new study is out that looks at increases in all 50 states since 2000. And maybe not surprisingly, as I said, Washington State caps the list. So out of all 50 states, we have the most tax increases on income taxes, is what this was measuring. We have a capital gains income tax right now, and our state is imposed more of that kind of tax increase than any other state did. So that is not surprising given the direction of our legislature in increasing taxes. So let's get into some of the details. Over that period, over just the last few years, as a matter of fact, some states have been cutting their state income taxes. New Hampshire and Tennessee repealed their income taxes altogether. They're moving in a low tax direction. Regarding overall tax increases, Iowa turns out to be best in providing tax relief for its citizens. And the result of that is you see these trends. That's why we track this. Washington State in the past has had a reputation of being business friendly, a great place to live, raise a family, and we see that standing eroding in terms of objective, reasonable measures. These are not just somebody's opinion or tourism propaganda and advertising about the reputation of our state. In every meaningful metric, we are declining in relation to other states. I think we are also declining in absolute terms. Our tax burden is markedly higher than it was in the recent past, even 5 or 10 years ago. And yet at the same time, other states, red states and blue states in some cases, are moving in the other direction. They are providing more tax relief to their citizens, creating a better business environment. And what we think is a matter of fairness, allowing people to keep more of the money that they earn. Our elected leaders in this state like to talk a lot about affordability. We need to lower the cost of living, inflation. Oh no, it's terrible. They do that as a hit at capitalism. But what they don't do is look in their own backyard as to what they can do directly. Elected officials can provide financial relief to the people of our state instantaneously by simply lowering the amount of money that they take from everybody. So we think whenever there's a talk about affordability and inflation in our society, the tax burden should be on the list. That is a direct cost that our elected officials impose on every family in the state. The result of that is we are moving in the direction of being more business unfriendly, making it harder to live a life here, have opportunity, and to raise a family. That's our primary concern about the direction of Washington State. And there's another study that came out, reported in the Center Square on August 12th, in which Washington State has fallen from the 36th best state to live in by this metric to compared to Idaho, our neighbor, they are second on the list of the best state to live in. So this report looked at what factors cause Washington to be worse, dropping down the list in terms of attractability, livability in our state. And here are a couple of factors that they list. In Washington State, higher cost of living, poor housing affordability, higher property taxes, higher crime rates, fewer law enforcement employees per capita, more traffic congestion, lower road quality, and lower rankings in education and on some health metrics. So other than that list, everything is fine. So whenever I hear from our elected officials how great everything is going, I think about these factors, and it is a long list. It's not just that we're doing poorly in some areas and then improving in others. There seems to be a general downward trend in the state. We hope that our state legislature, our governor, will take a look at that seriously and maybe begin to turn things around. The next issue I'll look at is an August 13th letter that was put out by the U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi, that was sent to 33 jurisdictions across the country, states and cities, regarding their so-called sanctuary city or sanctuary state status. That includes different definitions, but generally what the term means is a refusal by local law enforcement to cooperate with federal officials when it comes to enforcing the country's immigration laws. Guess what? We made the list twice. Seattle proclaims itself as a sanctuary city, and Washington state as a whole, based on a law that the legislature passed in 2019 and was signed by Governor Jay Inslee, makes Washington a, quote, sanctuary state. What that means in specific terms is the legislature instructed the state patrol and local law enforcement in Washington state to not honor detainers and warrants issued by federal authorities, or to provide information about criminal illegal aliens that might be in our state, about how they could be located and safely arrested or detained. That makes a kind of a two-tier justice system. On the one hand, we have an entire system of city, municipal, and state prisons, law enforcement, courts is operating on one track. And then the federal authorities are trying to enforce federal law on a completely different track. And according to this law passed in Washington state, those two systems are not allowed to talk to each other when it comes to the area of immigration law. We think that that undermines the strength of our democracy. Most citizens want law enforcement to cooperate with each other, share information, and enforce the law fairly and in a balanced manner. In most states, that's possible, not in Washington state. The other problem that it creates is it sends a signal to the public. This is state officials, the elected legislature, lawmakers in our state are basically saying to every resident, hey, we elites decide what laws we're going to follow. We pick and choose which laws are going to be enforced and which ones aren't. Yet we expect everybody else in the state to follow every single law that the state passes. So with that example, why don't we as individuals get to decide which laws we're going to pass, we're going to follow, and which ones we're not? That obviously would be a disaster. What we think in terms of fairness and democracy, that state and local officials should cooperate with federal officials, and that sends a good civics lessons to everyone to respect the law and follow the rules. If you don't like the rules or you don't like a law, then you should try to change it. So states and cities have 5 days to respond to the Attorney General's letter. We'll see what state officials in our state do on that. Next is, in a case that came up at the Puyallup Fair, is this suppressing democracy and free speech? You can decide for yourself. What happened was that Puyallup Fair officials informed the Pierce County Republican Party that they could not collect signatures for state initiatives or sell merchandise at their booth at the Puyallup Fair. Well, you can imagine what the Republican Party said, which was, what's the point of having a booth if we're not allowed to promote our message and sell our merchandise? So there was a meeting between party officials and Puyallup Fair officials, and the Puyallup Fair reversed themselves. They said that they had received complaints, that they were trying to respond to that. In their defense, they also said that the Puyallup Fair is a big, complicated event that involves lots of different groups. Hey, we're trying to balance interests. But again, from our point of view, what interest is there to balance? It's a public event. We have free speech. The Republican Party is a completely legitimate political party. Why are they not, along with the libertarians, Democrats, socialists, or whomever that wants to convey their message in a peaceful, reasonable way, paying the rent on a booth at the fair? Why shouldn't they be able to promote any message that they want? And it turns out that the Republican Party won on that. Of course, they had said, if we're not allowed to convey our message, then we're just not going to participate in the fair. And that's when officials turned around. So the good news is the fair opens on August 29th, and the Republican Party will have their booth. I guess the Democrats will have one too, or whoever else wants to have one. It's great. And what I like about this, and what was surprising to me that this came up, is that county fairs have been going on in the U.S. for 200 years, and talking politics, giving speeches, even campaigning at county fairs is a long tradition in our country. And it's surprising to me that the most prestigious fair in the state, the Puyallup Fair, would even consider shutting down one of the parties. They resolved that, and that's the good news. Next issue is whether Washington has a redistricting problem. So this is being debated in Illinois and in Texas nationally. California is talking about doing redistricting. And I thought I would take a look at what the situation is here. So currently, our state's congressional delegation has 12 seats, 2 senators and 10 House of Representatives, congressmen, and the Democrats hold 10 of those 12 seats. Republicans hold 2 seats, which works out to be about 16% of the delegation. But at the same time, in the last election, Republicans won just slightly less than 40% of the vote. So there seems to be an imbalance there. We have an independent districting commission. This is a system that people support. It was put in place by the voters in 1983. The last redistricting commission met in 2021 based on the census, put all the legislative districts in place. That commission is due to meet again in 2031 to do redistricting every 10 years. Makes sense. So you can make your own judgment about whether that's imbalanced or not, whether the districts need to be moved. But generally, we have a pretty stable system, which is popular, but with one caveat. In 2024, a court ruled that the district lines around Yakima had to be redrawn. This ended up hurting Republicans and actually depriving Republicans of Hispanic support that they received in that area. That issue was all resolved by the courts. But what's strange to us is, why did the courts dive in halfway through the 10-year period? This is the disruption that's happening in Texas and other places. If the districts are set, just let the elections go forward, and then when redistricting comes up, take a look at the district lines then. This issue in Yakima was all settled. We hope that it doesn't come up again, and we think that our independent redistricting system is working well and should not be interfered with. So with that, I'll mention lastly that there was a court ruling on in-state tuition for illegal aliens. This happened in Oklahoma. Oklahoma had the same system that Washington State does, which is people who are in the state illegally are allowed to get in-state favorable tuition to go to colleges and universities. In Oklahoma, the court struck that down. And it makes sense that a program that is set up for the legislature and funded by taxpayers is meant to benefit people living in the state, the legal residents of the state who are meant to benefit from that program. But another problem that the court pointed out is that American citizens from other states were being charged more to attend university in Oklahoma than illegal residents of that same state. And we have the same situation here. So we don't know whether this will be a precedent, but it does raise the issue of fairness, whether tax funding is being used for higher education in the way that was intended. We think that that's an issue that the legislature should look at so that there's a uniform standard that applies equally to everyone. With that, I'll wrap up and just point out a few events we have. Speaking of Yakima, we have a Yakima Policy Forum coming up led by Chris Corey of our staff. That's on August 19th. We're also joining with the Spokane Business Association for a lunch on August 20th. We have our annual dinners coming up in the fall. Those are in September 11th and October 10th. And then, very exciting, our Young Professionals program for the first time has created their own gala dinner that they will have in Bellevue on October 4th. All of our young professional gatherings are a lot of fun, and we expect that event to sell out as well. And with that, I'll be back next time with another update. Thanks for listening.
If you found this informative, share it with a friend and consider checking out one of our suggested videos over here. Make sure you're subscribed so that you can stay up to date with the latest policy news from Washington.